Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay. So, the title of my integrated mini teaching unit was Summer Memories, and I designed it for third grade. Um, and the painting that I chose was Carnation Lily Lily Rose by John Singer Sargent, and he did this in 1885. For the first lesson, Social Studies and Art History, I would introduce the lesson by um, asking students if they're able to guess the time period based on looking at the painting. And then I will tell them that it was created in 1885 and ask them what they think America was like during that time. And we will then talk about how heavily the British influenced America during this time and how various types of people who were alive during this time were influenced. So the standard that I chose was Social Studies for third grade, History number 3, which was Explain the Factors that Shaped British Colonial America. And letter C said describe colonial life in America from perspectives of various people, large landowners, farmers, artisans, women, children, indentured servants, slaves, and American Indians. So my objectives were for students to create a picture of either a landowner, farmer, artisan, or indentured servant and write a story from their perspective about what their life was like. So for my abbreviated lesson, I will point out the girls' dresses because that is what initially clued me in to the fact that this painting was older and inspired by an event that took place during that time period, because the artist was actually inspired by 2 girls that he saw creating paper lanterns, and he wanted to recreate that moment that he happened upon in one of his paintings. So they're dressed in nightgowns. So I'll ask them what period they think is being captured in the painting, and then we'll discuss how colonial America was shaped and heavily influenced by Britain, and we'll discuss the aspects of various members of society's lives, like the landowners, farmers, artisans, and indentured servants, and students will use those aspects to create a landowner, farmer, artisan, or indentured servant with construction paper, or to draw it on a piece of paper, and then they'll write a story taking the perspective of one of those people about what their life is like. So my assessment would be their stories. I would evaluate the stories to make sure they include details about how that person may have felt and what a day in their life would have maybe been like. So for my language arts and aesthetics lesson, I would introduce the painting by asking students what they think is happening. And then I would point out that the painting is showing 2 girls creating a summer memory. And the standard that I'm going off of is ELA for third grade, writing number 3, which is write a narrative to develop a real or imagined experience or an event using effective technique, descriptive details, and clear event sequences. So my objectives would be for the students to write a personal narrative about their favorite summer memory, and then I would have them answer the aesthetic questions, which would be, does this painting remind you of anything you've experienced? How does the painting make you feel? What parts of the painting or what about the painting makes you feel this way? And they would answer those questions in their journals. So I would discuss how the painting is reminiscent of summer and tell the students how the artist actually painted it at twilight every day of summer for several years. And I would then pose my aesthetic questions to them and give them time to respond in their journals. And then we would discuss how the painting captures the girls making the lanterns and creating their own summer memory. And I would ask them to think of some of their favorite summer memories and write a narrative about them. And my assessment would be collecting the narratives. They should be at least a page long and contain very descriptive details about their summer memory. And then their journals would also be collected for me to view their responses about the aesthetics questions. For my math lesson and art history, math and art criticism. So I would introduce the painting by giving background information, so the artist's inspiration, like I already told you guys, and his materials. So he used oil paints. It's an oil painting. And I would ask them to take a few minutes to look at the painting and answer questions in their journal. And the questions I came up with, or the questions I used from the graphic organizer, were: what do you see in the art? What elements, principles can you identify? What do you think the story is behind the art? And do you think the artist did a good job on the painting? Why or why not? And I would have them record their responses in their journals. The Common Core standard that I chose was for students to reason with shapes and their attributes. So my objectives were for students to identify the various shapes found in the artwork, and the second objective would be for students to use the shapes to create a flower with construction paper, because obviously there are many flowers in the painting. So my abbreviated lesson would be: I would point out the lanterns and ask students what shape they see, and they would hopefully say circles or ovals. And I would ask them to identify any other shapes they see in the artwork. So I should hear, triangles, squares, things like that, and we would discuss the attributes of each of those shapes. And then I would ask students to use all the shapes that we had discussed and cut them out using construction paper and put them all together to make a paper flower craft thing. And my assessment would be whether students included all of the shapes in the painting to create their flower. For my science and art project lesson, I based it off of, so third grade science standards are very minimal, and they're pretty much all about the region of Georgia. So I really couldn't keep to my theme or find a good one that I was inspired by with this painting to work with. So I did go up to fourth grade because I just had an idea that I really wanted to use. So my science standard was for fourth grade, and it was obtain, evaluate, and communicate information about the nature of light and how light interacts with objects. And the substandard was plan and carry out an investigation utilizing everyday materials to explore examples of when light is refracted. So I would introduce the painting to students and ask them what they notice about how the light is portrayed. And in my questioning, I would ask them to really point out what they see and if they can see how light is being manipulated. And I would indicate to students that we are doing an art project. So my objectives would be that students will explore how light interacts with objects by creating their own paper lanterns, which I actually really would like to do in my class one day because it sounds super fun. So my abbreviated lesson, I will point to the paper lanterns and ask students what they notice about them. We will then discuss the nature of light and do some exploration about how it interacts with objects using a flashlight before we begin making our paper lanterns. And after we were done making the lanterns and we went outside, and it would be hard in daylight. Obviously, school occurs in daylight. But maybe I would even allow them to take them home and record their findings about what happened to the light inside the paper lantern in their science journals. And so my assessment would be to collect their science journals and assess their findings. So my extension activity, my standard that I went off of was synthesizing and relating knowledge and personal experiences to make art. So my objective was for students to create a picture representative of their favorite summer memory. And so the art techniques and materials they would need, I would have them use oil pastels to recreate one of their favorite summer memories. This could even go hand in hand with the language arts lesson based off of their narrative. And then the the knowledge that students would need to have would be they would need to know about the various types of color schemes, so like tertiary colors, etc. And they would also need to know about proportion and unity. And some images that I would like to see in their artwork, I would really want them to capture the setting of their memory. So if they were out on the lake, I'd want to see the lake, maybe a boat, and I'd like to see the activity they were doing or some kind of implied activity. So if they were on the lake and they were tubing, I'd want to see the lake, a boat, and maybe a little tube getting pulled behind, you know? Yeah, and then my assessment would be their artwork, and included in the artwork would be the following criteria. I would want a setting or landscape, something representative of what they were doing in the memory. And that's all. Thank you for watching, because this is super long.